All right. Welcome to another episode of KUDEN Radio. So let's just jump right into well, not just jumping right into things, but anyway. So in this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to be exploring something deeper than technique. Of course, it's KUDEN, right? But deeper than technique, deeper than kata, and honestly, deeper than most students ever get close to, especially in this day and age. There I go, sounding like an old guy again. But in the world where Ninjutsu has been turned into a martial arts choice among martial arts choices. So what we're going to do is we're continuing a discussion that I started last week. We started in KUDEN with this whole idea of getting unstuck, and we took a look at action, handling things like confidence and motivation and things like that, right? And taking a look at the warrior's perspective on that. But I really threw people off during Wednesday's Whiteboard Wednesday, where as a part of that getting unstuck, I focused on the concept of Hodoki, right? Escaping. And most people think of, grab escapes, right? And so during that episode, I shared three layers or three levels of Hodoki, right? And again, typically seen as grab escapes, right? So first level was the conventional, what everyone thinks about, right? Wrist grabs, body grabs, we looked at the more involved, right? Where what's grabbing you might not be the attacker directly. They might be, right? But things like the effect of gravity when our kamae is broken, right? So kamae Hodoki, right? Specialty grab situations like when we're in a joint lock, right? So kansetsu Hodoki. Or even when we find that we're holding our breath, or in situations where we can actually use our breath to slow our heartbeat, to release tension, that kind of thing, right? So kuki Hodoki, right? I have a whole episode coming up on looking at an oku highest level of for looking at the Kuki Shinden school from this perspective. But either way, right? So, but again, I've been really thinking about this and carrying things on because again, the getting unstuck episode last time was based on reviewing and researching past programs and past teachings and whatnot I've done over the years, and finding that the one, right, that was the most popular for most people was this getting unstuck training that I did, right? And so we looked at a certain aspect of it last week, right? But what I want to do with this episode is I want to dive much deeper into that third level, right, that I talked about during Whiteboard Wednesday, right? Again, the deeper, or what we might call in today's world, right, we might call the meta level, right, the subconscious level, right? So here we're talking about the invisible grabs, right? We're talking about the emotional, the mental, karmic, and even psychological ties, right, that bind you long before an attacker ever reaches out for your wrist or whatever body part, right? So these are the ties that it can be stronger than iron, stronger than chains, stronger than shackles, right? Um, Often they're the grab before the grab that we're all training to escape with our so-called cool moves, right? And if you don't know how to escape from these, no amount of technique will save you. I'll talk about that later on in the episode, right? Um, because I think a lot of people are looking for the technique route and just feeling like crap because there's something else going on, right? But again, no amount of technique, no amount of skills in that conventional realm will save you in the dojo or in life, right? And so this is Kokoro Hodoki, right? And during this episode, we're going to dive into that realm, right, through the lens of long distance training, returning to training, and the warrior's comeback path, right? So let's go ahead and get into it. So I'll see you as soon as we get back.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio. Real training for real people in a real world.
All right, we are back. So I'm going to hold off asking about questions or anything for just a quick minute here because I really want to set this up. Okay, so again, welcome to everyone. If you're new, welcome. If you're returning, here we are, right? Episode 285. So barring anything odd happening, because there won't be any holidays getting in the way. So barring anything odd happening, right? 15 weeks from now should be March 2nd, give or take. We're going to hit our 300th episode benchmark, anniversary, whatever, right? But again, what we're taking a look at here during this episode is a deeper look at something I started last week, right? This past week during our Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday, when I covered, again, 3 aspects of Hodoki: escaping, right? Escaping grabs, typically is the way we see it, right? So, and that includes the one I'm going to cover tonight, or covered during this episode, right? The one that literally surprised most students. And that is Kokoro Hodoki, right? The invisible ties that bind, right? I have found, teachers have warned, these are stronger than iron chains, okay? Shackling us to hesitation, confusion, and mediocrity. Good enough. Meh. So there's going to be a couple of gut punches for some. There's going to be, and not because I'm singling anybody out or whatever, it's just I think folks are going to be able to relate to this at a very, very deep level, right? But this episode is for you if you've ever wanted to get back to training but felt stuck, right? If you felt shame, guilt, the hesitation, the overwhelm, the frustration, not just about training, but in other areas of your life where you're trying to get traction. And it just seems like it's either one step forward, 3 steps back, or we're sliding back down the hill. We just can't get that inertia, or we get started and then next thing you know, it's a week or 2 or a month or 2 later or whatever, and we're trying to start again. Right. So, and the other folks that it's for is if you're a long distance student or just a distance training student, right? Or you want to be, because there's no other options, right? Where you are. This may be the most important KUDEN you've listened to yet, right? So I know, bold statement, Sensei. But yeah, we'll take a look at that. Anyway, James, my programmer for my program director from another mother, or something like that. Anyway, who's on? What's up, dude?
Looks like Kyle. and Maury, Michelle, Trinity, and Jared.
Awesome. Cool beans. Cool beans. Cool beans. Cool beans. Okay. I'm sure I'll ask here in a bit. So, as they would say at most amusement parks, when you get on to certain amusements, right? Um, many amusements in an amusement park. Um, maybe it's just me, but they're really set up to give you that experience or that thrill of being flung to or dropped to your death, but then yanking you back at the last second, right? And they call this fun. They call this amusing. They, right? Not. I don't. I use them as training devices for centering the heart, for breathing, for things like that. But yeah, yours truly has been in combat, and I don't find that visceral response amusing. But hey, you do you, right? I've seen the movie. The old guy dies first. Okay, so not going there. All right. I'll check back in with everybody here shortly, but we've got a lot to cover, and I'll try not to make this another 2.5, 3 hour episode. So let's start with something here that I hear a lot. Right? Let's start by killing one of the biggest lies in the modern martial arts world. Okay. And the lie is that you can't learn long distance. You might hear it in using different words like dojo training is best. You can't, you can't, whatever. You can't, right? But again, I don't mean to contradict all the gurus who have obviously done their historical research. And those of you who've been around for a while, you know how much I hate words like historical, traditional, or whatever. Not because I hate the words, not because I don't know what they mean, but one of my daughter's favorite movies is The Princess Bride, which means that yours truly has watched this movie more than a couple of times. Okay. It's a funny movie, but there's a line in this movie where this guy keeps using this word, and somebody says, I don't think that word means what you think it means. Okay. Like people throwing the word traditional around, right? I want to know what tradition. I want to know what era, right? I want to know what we're talking about, right? Where? I'm just sticking with Japanese history, right? Because some traditions within the Bujinkan started with Takamatsu Sensei, right? Other ones, yeah, they go back quite a distance, okay? But they meant different things at different times. Even the word samurai, right? The word itself means the same, one who serves, but their job, what they actually did, not the same. Sometimes they were upper class. Sometimes they were the lackeys in the group that were guarding the Princess Bride, or they were doing administrative tasks in an office, right? This is what happens when we, I don't know, gloss over things, right? So, but historically, right? Almost every great warrior, I'll say that again, almost every great warrior trained long distance. The hell are you talking about, Sensei? That doesn't make any sense. I know. But, my teens and preteens used to say that to me when I would point out how things worked growing up, and when they were growing up, and they'd look at me perplexed because their entire world revolved around this bubble that they thought they had figured out, but they didn't know how the world worked. They didn't know how anything worked outside of their goddamn neighborhood, because that was their world, right? And so I'd point something out, and they'd go, "It doesn't make any sense." Now that they're out in the world, it makes more sense. Okay. But let's just toss out a couple of names that, I don't know, maybe you've heard a couple of them, maybe not. Who knows? Let's try. All right. Hatsumi Sensei. Okay. Hatsumi Sensei lived hours by car, few hours by express train, maybe fewer by Shinkansen. I'd have to look up the dates as to when Shinkansen actually came about and was actually much faster than express trains. Express trains in Japan, they're fast trains, but they're still on local tracks. They just don't stop at every stop. They skip over 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, right? So it just gets you there in less stops. A little bit faster, but not that much, right? But he visited Takamatsu Sensei, who lived way far away, right? On average, once a week, depending on what was going on at the clinic and other things in life and whatnot, right? But the rest of his training was solo training. Okay, visit for a day or 3, right? Take a shit ton of notes. Either he or his wife, if she went along, took just an ungodly amount of still photos, right? And shot, can't even say video footage because it was movie, right? Little Super 8mm cameras that, if you're not as old as I am and you don't have any experience with these things, you wouldn't know that the film reel that went into these things only lasted about 3 minutes at a pop. And he tried to document everything. It's a good thing he was a doctor, right? Okay. But yeah, I mentioned this last week too. Takamatsu Sensei gave him books and articles and things that he had written in between when Hatsumi Sensei visited, and sent him home with a shit ton of stuff. So it wasn't just techniques he had to study and try to get his head wrapped around and whatnot. It was this other stuff, right? Well, since we're on the topic, Takamatsu Sensei, right? I know a lot of people hear the stories about him training with Mizuta Sensei, his grandfather and uncle, Toda Ishitani, right? But that was only, childhood kind of stuff, right? He trained with Mizuta and was a high-ranking black belt in Takagi Yoshiryu when he was 13, right? So, but he traveled between teachers. He did a lot of training in isolation, right? Both in China and when he came back to Japan and contracted beriberi and had a tapeworm or a mess of tapeworms, right? And literally drug himself, his lifeless legs, up to the mountains to die. Trained and did things and eventually cured himself using a very stringent macrobiotic diet. But trained in isolation, fought throughout his life. That's how he gained experience, right? Manaka Sensei, who went on to found the Jininkan when he was in the Bujinkan very early on. He was in military service, right? Japanese military, okay? So he trained across deployments, right? He trained with others. He did train with Hatsumi Sensei when he was home at certain times, right? 1, 2, 3 of the times that he was home, he was either home or he happened to be training with U.S. or Canadian forces, and came to Stephen Hayes events and things like that, and taught. Right, first time I met him was very early '80s, and we did Koketsu Shoge and a bunch of that stuff. Right. But yeah, most of his training, right, self-study, taking the nuggets that he had, his notebook and all that kind of stuff, and working this stuff out. Another name, Musashi, Miyamoto Musashi. Okay, he trained alone between duels. No kata, no dojo, no training partners. Okay. Most samurai, I know that there were organized training sessions and things like that when they were, during peacetime or when they were growing up, those kind of things, right? But when they were going to be training with somebody who they found, right, there was this high-ranking teacher. They just heard about this person and whatnot, right? So they would go, they would get away if they could get away between wars or whatever, right? And they would visit this teacher for a few days. Then they returned home to train that thing. We're going to talk about that here in just a bit, right? For months to work it out. Okay. So here's the thing. If you're training alone or you're trying to come back to training without a dojo nearby, good. Fucking fantastic. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not being condescending or anything like that, right? You are in great company walking the same path as the masters, not a lesser one, not a crippled one, right? Not what all the naysayers think. Okay. See, there's this ugly little thing, right? There's a whole list of biases, right? We live in the 21st century in the Western world where we're all supposed to be keenly aware of our subconscious biases, as long as they fit whoever's ideological narrative is barking up the tree at the moment, right? But one of those things is anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is we think that things have always been done the way we found them, the way we were introduced to them. That's since they started teaching us back in the very, very early 80s. And that's where this 30-year cycle started taking us through the Shuhari process. Even though every year the theme changed, it was a way to disguise repetition, right? So there was like a 10-year cycle, 10-year cycle where we focused on form and kihon and those kind of things. Even though at one seminar, it was Kukushinden Ryu and spear and short sword. Okay. See, he mastered it like baiting in ego so it could want to do things, right? But that year, Kukushinden was all about like making your opponent think that you were fighting like 9 demon gods, right? Like he was facing that kind of power, right? Because that's what Kukushinden is all about on the Omote level, right? And then we covered it again from the Oda level. And then, like I said, in the upcoming episode, we'll take a look at a whole other level, right? So, but anyway, if you're training long distance, most of the master teachers that everybody looks up to, Japanese and Western, okay, in the grand scheme of things, even in Japan, like a lot of the daishian that everybody knows, or the ones that became soke and whatnot, right? They did live close to Tatsumi Sensei, but there were just as many over the years, right? Momatsu and a bunch of people that the names have long since gone, right? Moved closer to train, right? Took trains just like Tatsumi Sensei did to train for a class, go back home. Certainly most of the Western master teachers, Daishihan and whatnot, all long distance students. So for the guru to say that it can't be done, you know that old saying, right? Those who say that it can't be done should get the hell out of the way of the people who are actually doing it. Right? So anyway, just as a reminder, if you're getting value out of these episodes and whatnot, don't forget, like, share, subscribe, all that happy stuff, right? Share the love. Okay. James, anybody else sign in? Anybody else check in since the first pass through? Hey, look, it's James.
Yep. Alyssa, Dave, and Victor.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So All right, let's take a look at something here along these lines that I was introduced to many years ago. A lot of you know that my first teacher in the art was Stephen Hayes. He was my introduction to Hatsumi Sensei and many of the other Japanese teachers. Isuke Sensei, Nagato Sensei, Sendo Sensei. But at a certain point, I'll talk about another little concept that I was introduced to via him. But there was this concept that at a certain point, he named his dojo. And then by extension, it's kind of like the Bujinkan story, right? The curriculum became known as the Kasumian curriculum, right? Just like Bujinkan, right? Bujinkan started out as being the name of Hatsumi Sensei's dojo, and then it grew into an organization, and then it grew into or got mistranslated as a style of martial arts. I have nothing to say about that. So the Kasumian started out being the name of Stephen Hayes' dojo. Kasumi, right, means fog, mist, that or anything that can kind of disrupt your vision, right? That you have to be able to see through to understand what's going on the other side, because it's screwing with your eyes, right? A hot macadam or tar road surface in the heat of summer, right? Coming up, you're going to crest a hill, but if you look in front of you, right, the heat, that convection of the heat rising off the road surface, right? You can't see clearly, right, what's on the other side. Everything's all broken up and washed out and whatnot. And it's not until you get closer and you pierce that veil that you can actually see, right? But Kasumi also means haze, as in Haze, like a hazy day, right? So it was also a play on words, right? But on, an, this is the Japanese concept that I want to talk about, right? On is both a thing, but it's also a concept, right? The on concept is the idea of retreating from the world to return better equipped for it. It's tied to the Musha Shugyo, the warrior's quest, right? I'll talk about that. We've talked about it in the past, talk about it some other episode, but historically, right, warriors would retreat to an on, okay? When we think about an on, think about like a ski hut, or these things that are up in the mountains and whatnot, right? They're not lodges, they're not resorts where people go to or whatever. They're more like getaway safe havens, right? You get caught in a bad storm or whatever. There's food, there's provisions, there's emergency medical supplies, a radio, something like that there or whatever. Okay, so an on in ancient Japan wasn't like that. It was just a place, but it didn't have to be a building. Okay, so an on, right, is or could be a hut, could be seen as a hermitage, right? The founder of Shugendo, that the Yamabushi mountain aesthetic priest in Japan that are connected to the ninja, Enno Gyoja, his on was a cave, right? Carved out of a mountain, right? So, but it's a temporary place away from the world, a place where you can recalibrate, reset, train without the pulls of life. I don't mean POOL, I mean PULLS, right? Without the tugs and pulls and demands and shit like that of day-to-day life. Okay. In today's world, that's how I try to frame our seminars, camps, weekend intensive, those kind of things, right? Those are modern on. Because I mean, think about it. If you go to class, or you go to even a morning or an afternoon workshop, right? Phone still goes off. the honeydew lists are still waiting for you, right? As soon as you are done, whatever, right? But if you have to travel, you go to a seminar, you go to, do a 2-day, 2.5-day, 3-day, week-long, whatever, right? Go to Japan with me for a week or two. It's harder for people to reach you. It's easier to focus on the task at hand, which is your personal development, your training, your study, your exploration of yourself, the world, the teachings, right? Okay. So that's the modern concept of an on. But you could also use the traditional one, right? Go into the mountains for a little while and shit. Dave created his own, right? Moved to a mountain away from the big city and told everybody to leave him the hell alone, unless he signs on to the internet and jumps onto our classes, right? So, but that was one way, right? Or like I said earlier, right? If they had a teacher or they learned of one, right, who they could learn something from, something better, right? They wanted to add to their skills. This was a master, right? They'd visit for a day or 3, however long they could get away, right? But usually it wasn't very long, right? We have these fantasized versions of what things were like. Life was still life, right? Life was even worse because they couldn't, order from Uber Eats and have shit delivered to them, right? But they'd visit and learn maybe only one technique, maybe 2, right? Work on that. They might, have some insight-based conversations because they weren't going to waste the time with this teacher, right? Telling jokes and whatever, right? They would do this. And then they return to the world to work on that thing, to run it through the traditional shuhari process, right? For weeks or months afterwards. That's traditional. Before the whole dojo concept was even invented. And actually it wasn't even, some of you know this, but the dojo concept was not invented as a martial arts thing. Right? The dojo concept is a product of Buddhist training and study because groups and whatnot got together and then they needed places for meditation and study and whatnot during inclement weather. Right. So it's almost like an extension of the monastery, that kind of thing, but not so long term. Okay. It wasn't for quite a long time before that was picked up by martial arts teachers, typically after the Warring States period and whatnot, when there just wasn't that much of a call. During the Edo period, when the Tokugawa shogunate took over, had the 100 years of enforced peace, right? Got a bunch of warriors that are now out of work, but they don't have any other sellable skill sets, so they start teaching. Okay, there's a whole rabbit hole we could uncover, or a can of worms that we could uncover there, but I won't. Right? So, listen, right? You don't learn everything from your teacher, right? Even if you do go to a dojo, right? This is also a huge misunderstanding, right? And in all honesty, it makes for spoon-fed, lazy, assumptive students, right? I'm talking about the ones who go to the dojo. Right? Not all. And these are not my words. These are words of senior master teachers and Hatsumi Sensei, who preferred long-distance students because they spent a lot of money to get there, not just the seminar fee, right? And they paid more attention because they didn't know how long it would be until they were back again. Okay. So either way, right? Even if you do go to the dojo, think about how many hours are you in the dojo? You don't live there. You're not in Uchideshi, right? So you're in the world. You're at home way more often, way longer in a week, even if you are a local dojo student, right? Than you are in the dojo, right? So you're not in front of your teacher. They're not checking you all the time. That's another big sticking point for people who are local dojo students, where they confuse dojo time with practice time. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. We want to talk about traditional, right? Well, I would like to be an uchideshi, a live-in student. No, you wouldn't. You're going to be cleaning, cooking, working, so the teacher can have all that time to study more, do other things, right? You can have a class a day, 2 classes a day, whatever. And you might be doing all that cleaning, cooking, and bullshit and all that for a good year before they let you on the dojo floor. Yeah, I know. That's what my sensei told me. Okay. Anybody double check to make sure the sensei was right? Yeah. This is basic Japanese or Filipino it's all over the place, right? History. Okay. But either way, distance or local or whatever, right? You go to the dojo, you go to a seminar, you go to a camp, right? You go to an on, right? Go to the teacher. You learn a few key insights, and then you go run them through the shuhari process in your own life. Okay? The ones who make it the farthest, who go the deepest, right? Who enter levels that everybody wishes and hopes for, do 3 to 10 times more practice and study and whatnot outside the dojo than they do inside the dojo. Again, Hatsumi Sensei's words, not mine. In fact, he extended that globally to say that all successful people spend 3 or more times as much in the way of time, effort, money, commitment, all those kind of things, right? To become great. 3 to 10 times more than everybody else. Right? So that's why there aren't as many as there could be. I keep going back to that one statement. What is it, James? It's too much fucking hard work. It takes too much. Right? What's my joke in the dojo with the kids? And they're like, oh, Sensei, my arms hurt. I'm standing here in Hira for like more than 35 seconds. Right? Like, what do I say? Yep. It's easier to make the guy on the TV screen do all the moves than it is for us to do it. Right? So let's keep moving here, right? I apologize if I disturbed anyone, rattled their belief system about history and tradition and whatnot, but in Hatsumi Sensei's words one year when he was absolutely pissed off at people for making the Bujinkan look like shit, and that was when they were visiting Japan, going to sword shops, being out in public, right? The lesson was very clear, and this is literal. You are studying a Japanese martial art. It is your job, no one else's, to understand Japanese culture, etiquette, and the way things are done, Japanese style, Japanese culture, that kind of stuff, right? Not like you would do it back home. It's our responsibility, right? Because the art that everybody is trying to learn is a Japanese expression of a Chinese expression of something that was developed along the Silk Road into Tibet, into India, those kind of things for centuries, right? So if we're trying to learn this thing without learning how Japanese people think, how the culture, the etiquette, those kind of things developed over time and why, and how another episode I have coming up here pretty soon, how the Japanese warrior class, while most Japanese would tell you it doesn't exist anymore, it absolutely does affect tons of day-to-day interactions and reflections and whatnot if you know what to look for. right? But to learn something that this Japanese martial art without anyway. So let's do this first. Before I was going to go into this, I was going to go directly into this Kokoro Hodoki, but I think we need to set up something a little bit earlier first, right? So, and I'll get to comments and whatnot that people may have thrown into the things and whatnot. But again, I got a lot here for you. I've got like 13 pages of notes. So, and I'm only on page 4. So anyway, so before we go deeper into the Kokoro Hodoki, right? The heart mind escaping. We'll define a little bit better here as we go, right? I want to give you a little background on a Japanese concept that ties perfectly into tonight's lesson. And yes, for those of you who know what I just did, I meant that little pun. Okay, a little warrior human for you. And if you don't know, you will soon. Okay, so there's a word in Japanese, right? Musubi, right? It comes from the Japanese verb musubu. This Japanese term, it means to bind, to tie, to knot, like to create a knot, right? To connect, to entangle. There's a bunch of words that this can come from. Okay. This is another one of those concepts that I was introduced to when I was still in the Hayes camp, because there was a student newsletter. Well, I'll talk about that here in a bit. But either way, Musubi was something we came to understand from a positive perspective. But to understand this topic, this level of Hodoki, right, we have to understand it from a different perspective, right? But this Japanese concept is in Japan, just generally, not just in Budo, right? That's another big thing that people just keep trying to do. They just keep trying to, like, they'll hear something or a Japanese term or Japanese phrase and then just lump it all in this box called Budo, like everyday Japanese people don't use it, right? Like stick fighting here in the East or here in the West, right? Like nobody picks up a pole cue or a tire iron or whatever. Well, we don't call it stick fighting. Okay. But it's not different, right? So, but this musubi, right? It's a very powerful word because it shows up everywhere, right? Everywhere. It's in Shinto creation myths. It's in the Amatsu Tatara cosmology that a lot of folks know about. Amatsu Tatara, the spiritual and power and healing teachings and whatnot. That's in the deeper levels of Ninjutsu. It's in samurai etiquette. It's in weapon cord tying. One of my guys, it's in my inner circle group in my platinum program, Davis. He came in for one of our camps and did a breakout session. Right, Lee Davis. He does like a bunch of bushcraft and outdoor survival education kind of stuff and whatnot. Really good guy. And so, but the breakout session was in teaching people. He did a couple of knots and whatnot, these ornate knots, but he taught people how to correctly retie the knot on the scabbard. When you buy a new Japanese katana, right? The scabbard, the knot is tied a certain way, right? Because you're supposed to be able to like tug on it in a certain way and it unravels, right? But most people don't put it back the same way, right? I don't. We use our swords way too much. But he taught everybody how to redo that knot. Really cool, right? And that's what I mean by weapon cord tying, right? Same thing with like tying or redoing the cordage on the handle, on the tsuka of the katana or the shoto wakizashi, right? So again, most non-Japanese, right, think musubi just means like a knot or to tie, right? And it does, but it also means something much deeper, right? Um, it also means the binding force that connects, constrains, or entangles us. Okay. So in Japanese thinking, in the old warrior traditions, musubi isn't just a rope or a cord, right? It's also a karmic tie, an emotional bond, a psychological attachment. Could also be a connection to fate, a commitment, or even a limiting identity, right? Some people might call it destiny, but this limiting identity, right? So, in other words, musubu, right, is the thread. Well, musubu is the verb, right? Musubi, the noun, right, is the thread that links who you were to what you're experiencing right now. Okay. It could be a link that uh, is made up of experience and worldly knowledge and wisdom and insight and those kind of things. But for most people, in some sense, in some area of their life, it's a chain connected to an anchor, holding it back. Okay. So I started to mention this earlier, but again, my first teacher here in the West, Stephen Hayes, he used this term very powerfully, right? We had this student newsletter when we first got started. He called it Ninja Realm. Anybody's been around long enough knows what I'm talking about, right? But he renamed it to Musubi. Right? And the reason he did it, right, was to signify the bond, the connection, the shared purpose that tied all of us together as practitioners walking the same path, right? It's very motivational, very clan building, right? Very connective, right? So again, musubi can bind in positive ways: shared purpose, lineage, commitment, or it can bind in negative ways: fear, hesitation, shame, old stories, old identities, past decisions, the old versions of yourself that still have a hand on your collar, right? Keeping you from going too far forward or drifting out of your lane, right? So musubi is the reason that you feel the pull of old habits. It's what's behind the statement, that's not me. Nah, it doesn't feel natural, right? What people really mean when they say it doesn't feel natural is it doesn't feel habitual, right? So it's the knot of identity that keeps us repeating the same patterns. It's the unseen tie between where you are and where your past decisions have anchored you, right? And this is exactly why we're talking about Kokoro Hodoki. Because if musubi is the knot, then Hodoki, escaping, right? Hodoki is the untying of the knot. Okay? If Hodoki is escaping, then Kokoro Hodoki is untying the knots inside the heart, the mind, the spirit, right? Breaking those ties that bind us in many cases stronger than iron could, right? And the knots that hold us the tightest are not on our wrists or not on our body, right? Te Hodoki, Tai Hodoki, whatever, right? They're not. Okay? They're the knots wrapped around our heart, our minds, our sense of self and identity, those kind of things. Okay? And before we can escape a grab on a wrist or a collar or an arm or a sleeve or wherever, right? Before we can break free of the manipulative friend or family member, right? Before we can live that life of freedom, right? Before we can live our best self, we must escape the musubi, the entrapment, the bind, right? The binding that's wrapped around our mind and spirit, right? We absolutely must. You must free yourself from the knot that says you can't start again. You can't train long distance. You, whatever, fill in the blank. Okay. The knot that tells you you're too old, too busy, too injured, too time constrained and overwhelmed. Right. I know. Right? Our schedules are full. Why? Like we didn't, at least in part, choose some of that stuff? Well, my job makes me. Who chose the job? My Mikio students are used to. They still might not like it, but they're used to having to look at the person in the mirror. Right? So the knot that tells you you must go back to training. The number of times I keep hearing people say, since I really want to get back to training, you can't go back. Right? So it's that knot or that voice that tells you you must go back to training instead of beginning from where you're standing right now. That knot, that musubi, right? That is the real grab. The grab that exists long before the physical one, long before the problem pops up, right? And that is what I hope, at least in part, we're going to break in this episode, right? So let's start here, right? Before we do that, let's just, James, any questions or comments, right? Before I talk about the grab before the grab a little bit more deeply. Anything?
Oh, just Jimmy said konbanwa.
That's not a question. That's a statement.
Sure.
Konbanwa. Konbanwa. Probably where you are. Where I am right now, the term would be oyasumisai. Right? But I thought good night was like saying goodbye. No. Could be, but they usually say things like jamata or, be careful saying sayonara. Right? But that's a goodbye. Yeah, sayonara is like a permanent goodbye. Like we're not going to see each other again. So, but it's all good. Not that that wasn't a little sidestep. Anyway, that's it. That's all. I keep putting these people to sleep, or I'm trying to wake them up. Can't reach I can't wait to wait the technology where I can reach through and like zap somebody or like shake them awake or hey. For those of you on audio only, I just twacked my own forehead on the screen. Anyway, all right. So, James, you have anything to throw on top of this? You've heard this stuff over and over again. This must get old. Just droning. There he is talking about the same shit again, just using different words.
Well, as you say, as soon as you learn the lesson, you can stop repeating it.
Yeah, I know. If I had a closed environment and didn't keep bringing on new students, right? I've really got to get other teachers to be covering lower level stuff because anyway.
Victor did just say, Victor said, love the subject, and Trinity just said, I really needed this topic today.
Trinity needed this topic. Trinity's like the psychoanalyst or psychoanalyst meets the spy undercover profiler so that she can kill you in your sleep without being in your town or touching you. But either way, all right. Cool. All right. So shall we continue? Sure. Yes, Sensei. Let's. All right. So again, I often call this the grab before the grab. That's what I definitely called it this last Whiteboard Wednesday. Right. So here's the thing, right? And anybody that's been to my seminars, anybody that's in my classes, Trinity, right, growing up with me, God help her. Anybody that's ever heard me say, if you're having a problem with a technique, if you're making a mistake, stop trying to fix that mistake, because that's not the problem. The problem is not the problem. The thing that caused that bottleneck, the thing that caused that to manifest, happened to move or 2 or 3 or whatever before that, or the mistakes you were making came to a head and now you can't do the next thing. Right? James, you've heard this, right? So again, this is a repeat for anybody that actually like listened to Whiteboard Wednesday, right? I know that Kyle did, because we had a conversation about it. He would help me with Friday's masterclass, right? So here's the thing. Most students think that Hodoki is escaping the wrist grab or the sleeve grab or the body grab, whatever, right? But the real grab happens long before someone touches you. It already has you. Okay? It's the emotional grab, right? It's that anxiousness or disturbance because I'm worried about being grabbed, right? It's the identity grab. Not good enough. I'm going to try this. Or yeah, I did martial arts and I have multiple levels of black belt, and so I should be good at this. So I'm going to piss myself off if I get it wrong. That kind of shit, right? The fear and self-doubt grab. Right? The I'm an anxious, anxiety-ridden person and I can't help it grab, right? The karmic grab. Past decisions, all that kind of stuff, right? The shame grab, hesitation grab, the not now or now's not the best time or everything has to be perfect before I can start something grab, the I'll start tomorrow procrastination grab, whatever, right? These are stronger than any physical grip that any freaking attacker could ever put on you or I. And if you're not careful, right, will make you an accomplice to your own ass kicking. Okay. Does this make sense? Can you relate to any of this? Anybody? All right. I'll wait. I have no place to go. Hanging out with you guys. All right. So if you're on audio only, you're probably nodding and stuff, and you can't like tap into anything into the chat or whatever. But you're always welcome to, shoot me an email if you want to touch base or anything like that. If you're on Facebook, you can DM. If you need to do it by email, right? Just shoot a message to warriorc@warrior-concepts-online.com. And yeah. So James, anybody relate? Anybody know? Yay. I think I lost James. Uh-oh. Did I lose him? Oh, there he is.
No, I don't see anything.
All right, I'm telling you, man, they're snoozing except for Victor. Right. All right. So, where the hell am I? I'm in East Central Pennsylvania. That's right. Anyway. All right. So, let's continue on here. And let's talk about what I call the warrior trapped inside the karmic knot. What the hell's a karmic knot, right? Karma. Okay. This is not karma as fate, karma as destiny, karma as luck, all kinds of bullshit that I see, right? Just like seeing the yin yang symbol. It's a good luck charm. It's a sign that people need to fucking look things up is what it is. Anyway, right? You can't tell that I grind my molars about some of this stuff, right, James? Anyway, so let's start this part off here with a story, right? And this is very personal. Okay, let me tell you a quick story here. About a 6-year-old, maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing 6, could have been 4, could have been 5, whatever, right? Watching my abusive stepfather beat on my mom, always have these fucking emotional, anger-laden meltdowns and things like that to get everybody to walk on eggshells, capitulate, to position himself as the God character, right? Same guy that, when they went grocery shopping, He was making really, really good money in the 70s. I mean, we're talking about somebody making $12 to $15 an hour in the 70s. And if you weren't around then, that's when the minimum wage was like $2.65 an hour. Okay. And lied his ass off, had us living in like welfare housing because he could get it for free. And there were no computers to verify data and all that kind of stuff. So he could write down any fucking numbers he wanted. You tell him I'm still like a little irritated about this. But there were all these things, right? Go grocery shopping, and there was a special place in the pantry for all of his stuff, which was all brand name stuff, canned goods, cereals, all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember what the off-brand stuff looked like, the generic brand stuff way back in the day. They all came with plain white wrappers and black print. Okay. There was no store brand or whatever to cover up for. Right? These are smaller pieces. These might have blemishes. I worked in a cannery. I know how the stuff is done. Right. So you really are not getting the same thing at a cheaper price. Okay. But anyway, what I do remember, and I remember exactly where I was standing as that little boy. And I can't remember the exact incident, but I remember him leaving the room. I remember the moment I had this thought. When I'm a dad and a husband, I will not do any of that. And I will give my kids whatever they want. I won't spank my children. I will not yell at my wife. I will not even have arguments with my wife. Right? Okay. It went way farther than that by implication. I know this because I had to confront the 5 or 6 year old when I was in my early to mid, no, not early, probably mid to late 20s, because I was in a failing marriage, the second one. And no matter how much I tried to carry out the instructions or the vow of that 5 or 6 year old, and I didn't realize the 5 or 6 year old was calling shots. The more I tried to do that, the more I got taken advantage of, the more the relationship went downhill, the more resentment that was there, all kinds of shit. I don't know if anybody can relate to this kind of stuff. But, and then there were moments where I knew in my heart of hearts that the right answer, the right tactic was to do certain things that they weren't pleasant, but they were karmically correct. They were the right action, the right speech, the right thing to do. And I prevented myself from doing them because as soon as I thought about doing it, that vow of not being him and therefore not doing anything he did, even though the reason he did it and his intent was different than the reason I would have been, didn't matter. And so the knot just keeps getting tied, right? Okay. So again, right? Many of us are trapped by decisions we made at 6 or 10 or 18 or 25, whatever, right? Decisions that we never revisited. Okay. Another little, this I use in the dojo for teaching kids. And sometimes adults, right? Where they're working a technique or they're being the uke and they throw a punch and they consistently stop or veer off track. And what I normally say to the kids, and again, sometimes to the adults, not always, depends on the person and context, but I get it, right? Mommy, dad, grandpa, grandma, whatever, right? Teachers, they told us not to hit. As a matter of fact, what they told us was, or they implied, that nice people don't hit, right? Everybody nods. Yeah. Okay. And they either told us, or by implication or by association, we decided, I want to be a nice person. I am a nice person. So therefore, I don't hit. And then I have to let him in on the grown-up lesson, right? Because parents will simplify lessons. And if they don't, it's because they didn't revisit things either, right? The full adult lesson is nice people don't hit other nice people, not trying to hurt them. So, okay, that lesson works generally in society. Yeah. But there's two places that the don't hit rule doesn't work. One, in a self-defense situation, and two, in martial arts or self-defense training. Okay. But if we, so, and I get it. Like a lot of us are all the tough guys and tough girls and whatnot, and we'll hit and whatever. But have you ever tweaked a joint or heard something snap or crack on your partner? And it could just been they have snapping joints and whatever, right? Or somebody will cry out, yeah, because they got hit, and all of a sudden you just oh shit, sorry, right? Or you can feel the musculature in your arm or whatever is applying that pressure just drain away. Not where you backed off and maintain a certain level, right? So you can know what's enough, what's too much, and what's not enough. But everything just drains away. That is karmic. That is so deeply embedded in subconscious storehouse, in muscle memory, that we can't not do it. Right? These are decisions, again, as a child, or it doesn't matter if we were taught or we decided or somebody gave it to us or we were programmed with it or whatever, right? We never validated it. We never revisited it. We never explored it. Okay. And then these decisions became binds, right? Bindings, chains, shackles, just like mine did. Right? Goes deeper than that. Right? You marry someone who needs or assumes control. And then there's this social construct, especially for guys. If honey ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. You have to decide at a certain point in your life, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? The fuck is that? Who came up with that? Right? Not talking about being an ass, right? Because sometimes you go, look, how about if we just agree to disagree, right? Let's do things your way. If it bottlenecks, like I think it might. If it doesn't, shit, I'm not going to complain, right? But I'll be on hand just in case we need a plan Z, right? But a lot of people, that karmic trap shows up as there's self-doubt, there's low self-value or whatever. So attention from anybody, I got attention, right? Even though there are millions of people on the planet of the opposite sex or the one that you're attracted to or whatever that you could choose from, even locally, right? But they showed me attention. Or, we had a moment and slept together, so I guess now we're boyfriend and girlfriend. Well, all kinds of shit, right? And then, or everything is fair and even until the ring goes on, and all of a sudden you're supposed to know the script was supposed to flip, or worse yet, you flipped the script and you became the asshole. Okay. Or you learn from a teacher who taught fear instead of freedom. I've had a couple of those, right? First class, beat the shit out of you so that you understood who was in charge, that kind of thing, right? So saying yes, sensei was more a form of obedience than a form of acknowledgement that yes, sensei, I understand your lesson. Okay. You could end up building an identity around not being like someone from your past. Like my story, right? Not measuring up. That's a whole other story from my past, right? Not being capable because of your lot in life. Whole different story from my life, right? Your heritage, because the man is keeping you down or supposedly keeping you down or whatever, right? These invisible knots. This is going to sound really odd. It's going to sound counterintuitive, But these invisible knots, lived consistently, become your real dojo, your training hall. And if you're like most people, you get really good at those skills. We'll call them knot tying 101, 202, 303, 405. University people know what I'm talking about, right? And this is what lies behind one of the highest levels of training, both in the Bujinkan and here at Warrior Concepts. Right? Hodoki, not just the escape, the technique that breaks their grip or whatever, right? But the freeing of the heart and mind from limited vision, from confusion, from hesitation, from egoistic pride, right? That I broke the grip, but I stayed in range and my partner reached out and tapped me, or that never happened in the dojo, which is also a karmic bind, right? We call that dojo syndrome. So in the dojo, right? Well, like the point of the technique is to get him off of me. And then what after that? Well, nothing. I got him off of me. Really? Because if you're still in range and you do that to a real attacker, pretty sure he's going to still punch you, because you breaking his grip isn't going to sell him on coming to your dojo. It's going to make him want to grab again, choke you, stab you, punch you in the face, whatever. So you break the grip and then you move to a position of safety, which is why in module 1, there aren't a whole lot of follow-ups after the technique, like creative follow-ups, do whatever, get him on the ground, lock him up, all the kind of shit that makes people feel all warm and fuzzy, right? The number one skill that people need to learn at the end of a certain point in the technique, which typically don't have your partner on the ground, because that can happen, right? The very first lesson needs to be go to Kamae out of range, reset the fight to 0, and look at him with that look that says, you keep coming, that's the nicest thing you're going to feel all day. Because if we don't train that, then we're going to defend the way we train. And if we ask questions in range of our attacker, a real attacker is going to hit us, right? We get distracted. The technique fails and we're not resilient. We don't just either go to Kamae or we shift to something else, right? We do a strike to get out, whatever, right? We make a mistake and then, shit. And then we need to start all over again. Yeah, that's when you die. That's how you die. Okay. The dojo is the place to practice that which you want to do out in the world. Yeah, we make mistakes. Okay. Talk about that here in a bit. Right? But we train the way we want to fight, the way we want to defend ourselves, the way we want to be successful. Right? Not like we're in a freaking vacuum and, well, in a real attack, no, you won't. You'll do exactly what you've programmed yourself to do, whether you're mindful of it or not. Okay? All of these things bind the mind, the heart, the spirit, whatever, to very specific habitual responses. Okay? So Kokoro Hodoki, the heart escape method, right, is the level where you learn to break the internal bindings that trap you long before any physical grab ever happens. Okay? Any questions to that, James? Any comments to that?
Scroll back up here. Victor asked, would you agree or not that Masubi cannot exist?
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. It's Victor. Go ahead. What is Masubi? Sorry.
Masubi cannot exist without Hodoki, much like light does not exist without darkness.
No. You mean like tying and binding can't yeah, there's always a way out. But remember, death is a way out. Hodoki is the awareness and skill set that allows one to escape. That's why we go to teachers. That's why we present experiences. That's why we take a lesson uncover the principles and concepts to it, and then apply it in many different ways so that we're not stuck. One form of Hodoki, one form of Musubi is classifying techniques based on the way you got them. That's also a form of anchoring bias, right? So a lot of people are surprised to find out that the defenses to, let's say I'm carrying swords, not today in the dojo, right? And one of the attacks would be somebody reaching out to grab the tsuka, the handle of my sword, right? And the skill set to break that grip and free my weapon is te hodoki, right? Typically like hand escape, right? But they're the same, it's the same skill set, right? But a lot of people miss that because, well, he didn't grab my wrist. He didn't immobilize my hand. He didn't do this. He didn't do whatever. Okay. It's the same thing. He grabs my hanbo. It's still te hodoki. If it, whatever. Right. Yeah, but we could call it hanbo hodoki. We could call it kenjo. Why? That's the principle is te hodoki, right? Because that kihon teaches the principle. The principle then can be applied globally. Otherwise, we have to have a fucking rolling Rolodex in our head, for those of you old enough to know what a Rolodex is, right? Or a file system to be able to find technique 27, escape number 3. Okay. People get trapped on kata names. People get trapped on sensei said. People get trapped on, and that's why they don't evolve. They get really good at certain levels because, like, ego's good at that level. There's no evolution, right? So they focus on skill proficiency and not more of a principle-based skill, right? That can be applied. Okay, I often discuss this from the context of information, knowledge, wisdom. Okay, so information is learning something, right? I learned how to say hello, how are you in Russian once. I don't know how to say hello, how are you in Russian. I know, I could look it up. And he's like, dude, there's an app for that. Yeah, I know, but that doesn't serve me in the moment that I actually need to have a conversation. Okay? I can say phrases, but am I really conversing? No. Right? And the reason that I don't remember is because I never practiced it enough to turn it into knowledge. It's because it was just information. I have to practice it enough where it turns into something I can't forget. And then wisdom is knowing when to say that, under what context, right? Are there different levels of politeness? Trinity and I were just talking about the 5 different levels of politeness in Japanese. I think it was last week. And so there are these different conjugations to the verbs and all that kind of stuff. But let's translate this over into something else. And it's a very common analogy that I use. Tying your shoes, right? The number of kids that come into my dojo now that are 9, 10 years old that don't know how to fucking tie their shoes because mommy and daddy took the easy route and just got them slip-on shoes or Velcro because that's the way things are done. Yeah, except that they just stepped into a freaking martial arts uniform that has 4 cords on it that have to be tied, generally speaking, like tying your shoes. And now you have to dress your kid. So just because you skated the shoe thing doesn't mean that knot is not generally functional, right? And common in Western society. Okay. So, but information is mommy and daddy showed you how to do it. And then you practice, cramp your hand muscles, all kinds of things, right? Until you can do it. You keep doing it till you don't have to look. You don't just get the knot and the bow right and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a granny knot, right? You can pull on the cord, it releases it, but it's also snug to the foot. Everything is right, right? So you know how to do that, right? You can have a conversation with somebody at the gym, putting on your sneakers or taking your sneakers off, putting your, your day-to-day shoes back on or whatever, and you're having this conversation. You barely have to look, if at all, right? You tie your shoes, put the other foot on, tie your shoe, whatever, right? Okay, that's knowledge. Wisdom is understanding the nature of the knot and understanding that that knot would also work for tying parcels or birthday gifts or whatever. And it doesn't have to be with shoelaces. It could be with twine. It could be with rope. It could be with flat ribbon. But you know how to do it. And you understand context. You understand it's a slip knot, right? It holds, not a slip. Yeah, it's a slip knot. So you have it bound from within, but very easily pops right out. Okay. That it's that kind of thing. Right. So, do I believe that, Hodoki and I'm sorry, Musubi and Hodoki, that they do go together because you have a knot and then you have the freeing of the knot. But, do I believe that you're presented with them? No. Okay. Another example of that is when we do wilderness survival training and we do plant identification. Lots of people do plant identification. Also, there's people that, Sensei, there's an app for that, right? Yeah, I know. But what does that teach you? Okay. What can you do with that other than identifying the plants, right? As opposed to committing things to memory in certain categories, right? So when I teach plant identification, we divide things into food, medicinal, and utility. Okay. So what's edible? There are some plants, very few, that the entire thing is edible, right? Some, like dandelion, right? If it grows where you live, dandelion, the entire thing, it's one of the few plants that the entire thing is edible. It's also one of the few plants that has a milky white sap, a danger sign in nature, that is actually edible. Okay. Most certain things are edible, certain things are not. Like the tomato plant belongs in the nightshade family, or it's in the nightshade family. Very, very poisonous. Okay. So just because you can eat the tomato, 7 to 9% of the population cannot eat the tomato fruit either because it'll kill them, right? Just like if you tried to eat the greens of the tomato plant, right? So again, edible, right? Medicinal. What does what, right? Knowing that something, a lot of people, at least here in the States, in other parts of the world too, it might grow differently or whatever. Certain types of plantain. I don't mean the bananas, right? It's often growing like a weed in people's yard, right? Great plantain has more of a lettuce bulb, lettuce, flat lettuce kind of shape to it. Other ones known as spear tip plantain, it's just more spear tip. If you crush that up and put it on a bleeding wound, right? It's a styptic. Put a bandage over that and stuff. The juices of it will start the healing process, knitting things up and stuff like that. Really cool, right? So certain things for medicinal things, teas, tinctures, that kind of thing, right? If you want to know about poisons, just reverse engineer the medicinal things, because all medicines also are poisons. Like you wouldn't ingest foxglove. Okay. But if you're in a wilderness survival situation and somebody in your party or you lost your digitalis, being able to identify foxglove would be extremely helpful, because digitalis is derived from foxglove. That kind of thing. Utility, that stuff may be edible, maybe not, whatever. But that's things like making rope out of grass. Okay. Grass is edible, but you're going to die if that's all you eat, because we can't process grass, right? We don't have a cow's stomach, right? So, but that's what I mean by, you can make shelter out of it. You can, whatever, right? You can make spear, whatever, right? So this is transforming something from data, from technique collection, to something that's actually freaking usable in the world. Right? So anyway, that's a really good question, Victor. It's just I, I don't think it's as easy as, because like I said, death is a way out. Okay? So on a highest level, I'll go along with the statement. On a practical level, maybe not so much. Right? It might be one of those. It depends. Okay. So, and ultimately, we're the deciding factor. Not that we decide, but did we decide karmically weeks, months, or years ago to learn the damn lesson that we need now in the problem we're facing, or are we going to panic and try to make up shit on the fly? Okay. So again, now I want to come at this Hodoki from not just the idea of an escape, but the idea of freeing the heart and the mind from panic, from all kinds of things. Okay. So let's take a look at something else here that I think will reinforce this. And this comes from our Mikyo and historical study within that. Okay. So on the Kongokai mandala, there are these 4 symbols at the cardinal points on the border of the central die. So if anybody knows the mandala, this is the one with the 9 squares, the Shingon version anyway, right? So along that outer, thicker border, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 symbols, right? But the ones of the cardinal directions, top, bottom, center, and left and right center, are actually elephant herding tools. Okay. Now they all have vajra ends to them or whatever, right? One is a hook, one is a rope, one is a chain, and one is a bell. Okay. So this is actually a process for doing a whole bunch of things, but one of the primary reasons they were used was because people of the time could understand them as soon as they saw it. Right, as long as when the lesson was given as to why these are the symbol for, they'd go, duh. Okay, but for us, we need a little lesson in elephant herding, right? So let me tell you a little story here, and again, connected to Mikyo, mind science, that kind of thing, right? As a part of elephant herding, right, when a baby elephant pup, right, comes along, right, as part of the training, they tie a rope around one of its legs, and it's attached to a wooden stake that's driven into the ground. Okay. So this little pup is going to fight against it, whatever, until it realizes that it can't go anywhere. Okay. So it stops fighting it, and it understands that that's just part of life. Right. And now it operates around that. It can feel the rope, and it knows now how far it can travel before it feels the tug, but it stops killing itself. It stops fighting. It stops whatever, right? It accepts these conditions, right? But at a certain point, as the elephant grows to adulthood, right, it gets heavier and heavier and heavier, right? An elephant could just, like a grown elephant could just walk away from that wooden peg, and if the wooden peg stayed in the ground, it would snap, right? Or the rope would break. It's just big and strong, right? So at a certain point, they replace the rope with a chain, and it goes to the stake in the ground. Now, the stake in the ground might be bigger, whatever, but the elephant can feel this around its leg, right? And it can feel the tug. But by this point in its life, it has been so conditioned that the mere feel of the weight of the chain around its leg, and or how that starts to feel like a tug is about to occur, it doesn't fight against it. Okay. And that's how they kept it. Now, the herding things was, if an elephant wandered off, here's how they brought it back. And the bell at the end is the celebration you can have because success, right? But the point here is that the elephant, I mean, if you've ever been to a circus or anything like that, and you've seen this, right? In circuses, they still do it. Chains around the elephant's leg, foot, right? Kind of thing. And then it's just chained down. If you've ever looked at that and gone, fucking elephant should be able to just walk away from that. Like it doesn't even have to fight. You can just take a step, right? Why doesn't he just walk away? It's because of that karmic grab. Okay. So like the elephant tied as a baby, the chain that was once stronger than you is no longer strong enough to hold you. But your mind still believes it is. How's that for a mind fuck? Okay? This is not woo-woo. This is about conditioning. This is as soon as there's certain clues and cues that remind us of pain, loss, whatever, we put the brakes on. Okay? Let that sink in. This is critically important to your evolution as a warrior, as a successful human being, as a tatsujin, a fully actualized human being. Okay, so before we talk about why returning students or people trying to get back into training, people trying to restart, people, regardless of how much time got taken off, why they struggle most, right? Before we talk about that, James, anything?
Trinity said, I understand the necessity to be able to cause damage in given situations, but when it becomes muscle memory to push rather than pull away, how do we keep from pushing on the wrong person accidentally?
Well, there's just like when we were babies, trial and error, and exploring the amount, the context, all that kind of stuff, right? When you learn to write the alphabet or type it out or whatever, and then you to learn to form words, and then you learn to form sentences. How did you know what to put in a book report? Well, first I had to read the book, right? Second, I had to understand what I was reading. Three, I had to comprehend it, right? And then four, I had to think about how to say or how to review or explain what the book is about without what? Because people usually run into it in childhood because they don't know what to say. So they just copy passages out of the book, and then you're introduced to what? Something called plagiarism, right? And then they might not call it that in childhood or whatever, but you're supposed to use your own words. Don't copy passages out of the book, whatever, okay? You need to explain it so I understand that you understood it. I can read the book, right? But that kind of thing. So does that analogy work for you? James, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of idea, right? It is not just a cut and dry kind of thing. Okay. How will I know what technique to do against this guy? Right? That's where drills and rondori and stuff like that comes in. That's why a lot of people who go straight from kata and self-defense techniques straight to just open sparring end up dropping, what would you say, James? 70% or better, if not 90% or better of all the skills they learned, right?
Easy.
Because they didn't drill combinations. They didn't drill things like that to hold on to them. So the stuff they were naturally good at or they practiced the most, that's what stuck. And then that's how they fight, which makes them highly freaking predictable. Did she have an answer to that? Did that land for anybody? Could just be talking to myself and James.
Not yet.
Okay.
She hasn't responded.
Cool.
She also
Go
No,
ahead.
she had another one, and right after that one, it said there was a way in, thus there must be a way out. But are we willing to sacrifice what's necessary to escape?
Yeah, we have escapes for things, headlocks and all that fucking hurt. You can't get away from the fact that it's going to hurt. This guy's got you around the jaw, right? The facial nerves are being crushed, the TMJ is being misaligned, that kind of shit, right? Digging into your eye teeth, whatever, right? And then to get out, your ears are going to be freaking moved and stuff, right? Yeah. So, right. Are you willing to do that thing? I've mentioned, was it last week? I mentioned a couple times over one of the lessons I learned from Matsumi Sensei, and it didn't sink in until like my arm got broken during a defensive action, where some things they're right. Now, you can't get out of this technique. Yes, I can. I will just break my own arm, and now I'm out because your joint lock fails to work. The question is, am I willing to bring myself to do that? And am I able to weather the adrenal response, right? Like, will it throw me into shock and then I'm screwed, right? Which is the problem that everybody who does soft training and avoids anything more than a little bit of tweaking here or there or whatever, it's going to be a crapshoot based on their kind of karmic wiring, right? How tough can they be when shit really hurts, right? So same thing, right? These are the things that we have to ponder. These are the things that keep us from getting trapped in a moment, right? This is part of Kokoro Hodoki, right? Anytime we're practicing drills to, like in mod 1, right? I forget what I'm doing or I end a technique or whatever, immediately I create big kukan, go to kamai, take away easy access from them, that kind of stuff, right? Don't stay in the same place, all of that, right? I am practicing physically for Kokoro Hodoki, but also mentally, right? That I don't finish the technique and go into yay mode because he's on the ground, but now he can attack my legs, or he could draw a clip knife or whatever and cut a femoral artery or something like that, right? That I remember, shit, move, right? And when I don't have to remember that anymore, okay, then it's in muscle memory, okay? But a huge part of the training is reprogramming the flinch response, reprogramming the what I call natural human defensive response mechanism. Okay? Because it's very primitive. Very primitive. Okay. Anything else, James?
Yeah, Victor had another question in reference to Kokoro Hodoki. Many of my musubi have helped forge me to who I am. Should we identify and accept that our personal musubi exists before attempting to perform Hodoki?
That's a really good question, right? Remember when I was going through what musubi meant, that musubi has both a positive and a negative connotation, right? And you've been through some of the pre-Mikyo training, okay? So when we're coming up on that point in the 12-fold chain of dependent origination, where we have desire begets what? Grasping. Okay. At that point, we have an opportunity to cut the karmic chain by simply asking, does this serve me? Does this serve my goals? Does this move me in the direction I want to go? Even if I'm going to do the same thing, right, that's habitual, and if that's my skill set and that's my strength, then it's a positive, right? But what's different is I have already been freed from the mental, spiritual, emotional chains, the habits that keep me doing the same shit all the time, the same thing, the same way, different day, different situation, whatever. The very fact that I stopped, even briefly, to assess correct option. So yes, you will be rebuilding musubi. You will be rebuilding knots. Okay. But are they granny knots, or are they good functional knots that are not traps? They hold what they're supposed to hold, and they work the way they're supposed to work, but they're easily undone so that you're not trapped by it. You can open up the rope, retie another knot. You can use, I can make a slip knot to make a hoop and, retract it, right? I can splice one rope to another rope, whatever, right? So I have, I can extend this thing and it's just as strong as if they were one solid piece of rope, that kind of thing, right? So, so you have these things, right? Just like when we talk about musubi being connections and all that kind of stuff, right? The fact that you have techniques that that you have all these things, right? Yeah, they're musubi as well. Okay. Do you want to free yourself from those? Hit yourself in the head with a ball peen hammer. You'll forget your techniques. Okay? But no, we don't want to. Okay. But let me tell you something that does get in people's way. Okay. They think about the way they used to train, but now they're 20 years older and they have injuries and all that kind of stuff. And they're afraid that they can't train at all because they're not the 20-something without the injuries and without the age. Okay. So the musubi that ties them to the lineage and the power of the art and the desire to be able to protect themselves, their loved ones, that kind of thing, that's a positive. The entanglement with somebody that doesn't exist anymore, we'll talk about him in a minute, right? We're getting to that guy, right? So the same thing can be problematic in two different ways, or it can be positive and a negative, but it's the aspect, right? This is not an on or off switch. Hopefully that made sense. I'm gonna jump into this and keep on moving, but this is actually a lot of what's going to get us to and through Daikomyosai in January, right? Where I'm talking about the Gyokoryu's 0 point of resistance, but coincidentally, right? It's called 0 point of resistance, or it's that kind of thing in Gyokoryu, but other lineages within the Bujinkan have the same thing. It's just called something different. Okay. Anyway, all right. So let's talk about why returning students struggle most. Right. This could be you, could not. I'm just going to speak in the I guess second person, just to make it easier. Right. If this lands on you, great. If not, okay. Be patient. I'll get to you. So, if you're stuck returning to training or returning to a certain type of training, or maybe it's not training, maybe it's some other aspect of your life, trying to fix a relationship, you're trying to get back to a certain job or a certain whatever, right? If you're stuck in a certain aspect of training, or even stuck on someone's definition of what training for you should be, okay, you're almost certainly stuck somewhere else as well. I mean, in your life, right? Because the problem isn't your technique. Right? It's the invisible tie that's choking your momentum. Right? See, younger students nod at strategy. Yeah, strategy. Yeah. Where's my foot go and how hard do I hit him? Yeah, strategy. Yes, and type. Okay. Older students live strategy. We have to, by nature, be better at strategic thinking. We don't have the unscarred, unbroken, non-arthritic, riddled body of our 25-year-old self or whatever. Right? We have to think about how to do things, and we have to train to do things. We have to live efficiency and effectiveness. Right? How do I do this stuff? Least amount of wear and tear, that kind of thing. We have, right? Older returning students, right? The older returning student is actually closer to the essence of Ninpo because life has shown them the real battlefield, has forced them to accept that no matter how much they wished and wanted something else to be, The battlefield they're on is the fucking battlefield. There's nothing they can do about it other than adapt and overcome. Because if they try to act like the 20-something, they're going to fucking kill themselves. They're going to hurt themselves. They're going to wear out. Okay? This is where things like adult overwhelm, right? The life trap, responsibility pulling kami out of alignment, that kind of stuff, right? Young, strong, very flexible, resilient bodies can operate with shitty kami because they can make up for crappy taijutsu with speed and overt flexibility and stuff like that. We cannot. Just like taller, stronger, broader people and whatnot can get away with shitty taijutsu. Those of us who are shorter, thinner, weaker, cannot. Our taijutsu has to be closer to being on. Okay? But again, right? This is where the shame of taking time off, right? Of letting others dictate your life choices, the fear of looking like a beginner again, those kind of things, right? This is the thing that people are facing, but they're trying to force themselves to get back to training, right? Like they used to. But there's this nagging voice, dude, your back is fucked up, right? Your legs, your arthritis, whatever. Okay. So the warrior comeback path, right? If we could call it that, right? If you felt this, right? This dissonance, right? I want that past thing, but I got this current body, life, whatever, right? If you felt that, congratulations, right? You're living in reality. You're not broken. You're not unmotivated. You're not lazy. You're grabbed. You're bound. Right? You don't need technique. You need Hodoki. You need to free what's sticking in the mind, what's in the heart, that kind of thing, right? You need to untie, you need to cut, or otherwise break free of that musubi, that entanglement, that knot, right? The knots that have been tied to hold you down like the baby elephant, right? So do you understand? Do you get this, right? I was having a conversation with a student last week. They're not unmotivated. They're not whatever, right? But they were getting caught up in like all the mistakes, right? And then there was the time off. There was this. And I said, one of the questions I asked, and they said no, they didn't think with that. It was that. But this is very common, right? When I correct you, do you translate that as punishment? Do you translate that as I don't think you can do it, cut it, whatever? Okay. And then that circled around to some other things, and we had uncovered some things, right? But here's the thing that I had to point out, right? One of the jobs of a teacher is to be the awareness that we don't have until that awareness wakes up and pays attention, so we can see first a mistake that we made, not the result of the mistake. I missed, I lost the lock, whatever. That's the result of the mistake. That's not the mistake. If we're focusing on missing the lock or not being able to hold on to it or missing with the punch or whatever, if we're translating that as the mistake, then we're going to try to do things faster and harder, but we're not going to change anything about what we're doing other than faster and harder. If I can get there quicker, then or if I can be stronger on it, or if I can somehow hold them in place. That's the result. That's the effect of what's causing it. Okay. So until we can wake up to what we're doing that's causing that problem and remember, shit, angle was off, timing was off, whatever it was, right? We're never going to be able to fix it. Okay. Then until we can get to a point where we can feel the urge to step to the wrong position so we can remember and correct to go to the right position, or we feel ourselves going into the wrong position and we can correct on the fly. Okay. We can't fix it. We can't get to that skill level. But let's back up to the point of, if I am not aware of the mistake I'm making, when I'm making it, how do I fix it? You have an external awareness called a teacher or a senior who can spot it and point it out. No, you're doing this, I'm doing this. See the angle difference, or they grab your body and they reshift you and whatnot. So you can, okay, you got it. Okay. It's not just stepping over here. It's the feel here. There's a bunch of things that we're waking up an awareness about the right way to do it, and everything else that causes failure on the technique side, right, needs to be excluded. I need to get really good at feeling my way through. See, most students are trying to correct mistakes by being trapped and bound to a set kata pattern. Like I always do it the same way all the time. And there is a place for that in the shoot level, but then there's not a lot of dynamics going on. UK is always doing the same thing the same way. There's no resistance, that kind of thing. So you can learn the moves. Okay. If you keep making the same mistakes that are bound to what the kata is teaching, then your teacher needs to be kicking you in the ass and going, you have no business doing variations or any cool stuff, no matter who else is doing them, because you can't do the basic model right first. That's not punishment. That's letting you know, if you can't do the base standard Kihon correctly, then you're never going to get the Henka right unless you got lucky. And who the fuck wants survival based on luck? That's normal people. If we wanted to be normal, we wouldn't be doing something like this. Excuse my 4-letter words. Anyway, never mind. I get excited. Okay. So this, when the teacher is correcting, right? They're acting as the external awareness, and they might start off softly. I know I do. Then they might step in and, like one of my students, I made a joke. He's originally from Paterson, New Jersey. And if you know anything about that area, right, I had to step in and go, all right, look, I'm going to do this Paterson one. Motherfucker, what? And he goes, that actually worked. Right. So, but they need to punch through that wall and get you to want to wake up. But if that kind of speech is bound to people who talk to me like that, don't like me, want to see me fail, are punishing me, I'm not teacher's pet, whatever, fear of getting kicked out, then nothing can be fixed, right? But this type of correction from the teacher, it's not punishment, right? This kind of teaching, Isuku Sensei's dojo. Okay. It's not punishment. Okay. No matter how he spoke to me, no matter how those words came across or whatever, I always knew that it came from a place of love. I always knew that it came from, he wanted me to get this, to do this well. Right. And his words and his demeanor had to take the place of somebody who was actually going to beat, break, or kill me. So if I'm not okay with the teacher being mean to me, or sounding that way, or correcting me in a stern way, and I have to be spoken to nicely, what the fuck is going to happen to me when somebody's actually trying to put a knife in me? Okay. So this isn't punishment. It's not condemnation, anything like that. Right. But we can take it that way because that's how others meant it. Yeah. But this isn't them. That's another knot to untie. The person in front of you that's talking to you a certain way, that because of the words they're using or the tone they're using or whatever, or the way they're dressing or the facial expression they're making or whatever, right? We're not treating them like them. We're treating them like somebody else that reminds us or that they currently remind us of because that person who was an abusive ass way back in the day dressed a certain way, talked a certain way, used certain word, whatever. Okay. So anyway, anything else related to that, James, before I start to wind things up here? Let's see. We all go through stuff like this, right? You've gone through it. I've gone through it, right? Aaron's gone through it.
Trinity said from earlier, her response was kind of, this is definitely going to be a longer conversation this week.
Not this week. My week's busy. Nope. Love you, babe.
And Kyle said this has resonated on a deep level, much needed.
Yeah.
Dave
Awesome.
agrees. And Victor just said punishment can create quick, short-term behavior changes, but it leads to anxiety.
Yeah, but that's no different than salvation as well. That's temporary. Like parents complaining to the school to get them to handle the bully instead of getting their child someplace or whatever, martial arts school, sports, whatever, that will teach them to be more resilient and less sensitive and whatnot, and present less of the we'll call them triggers or flags or whatever that bullies look for, right? For an easy target, right? Because what the parents don't realize is that what they're doing is they're saving their child from today's bullies or this year's bullies in this grade in this school, but they're not arming their child with the skill sets that are going to be able to handle bullies the rest of their freaking life. Okay. And I learned that the hard way because in what a lot of people call middle school, we still call it junior high school, a karate club formed. And I gravitated to it, right? Probably because a lot of the abuse at home and stuff like that. But it was tough. Redundant stuff and I wasn't a very coordinated athletic kid, that kind of thing, right? So the sensei had a field day with me, right? But of all the stuff that my parents tried, calling the cops, talking to the bully's parents that usually went nowhere, the school, all that kind of stuff, right? Picking me up at certain places, saving me from whatever, right? They didn't do shit because it was a safety net for me, right? Martial arts training, and this is the thing that most people don't get. It wasn't the skills, because I had a long way to go to master these skills for an actual fight. But very quickly, certain things about me changed. Shoulders weren't slumped anymore. My posture changed. I didn't become arrogant or anything like that. I just breathed easier, right? And since I learned how to block things or get out of the way of things or whatever, right? I wasn't the same. Not because I learned stuff, but because I changed because of the process. And I couldn't pin this down until long after I was in adulthood and I'd been teaching this stuff, and really then I was studying conflict and all that kind of stuff, right? And it was then that I realized that there were certain small wins, certain things that, whether I liked them or not, I did, completed that, did something else, completed that, did something else, completed that. And they were these little micro wins. They weren't like a 46 move kata or anything like that. And little by little, Jeff stopped walking like this. Right? And the bullies went away. Now, they didn't go away. They just went away from me because I stopped exhibiting the flags. Okay. Now, this resonates more with parents and children than it does with adults who are still being bullied, because they think that I'm blaming them for why the bully attacks. Not blaming anybody. Bullies bully, but they're looking for very specific triggers or very specific signs to be able to get away with their brand of bullying. Physical, mental, emotional, that kind of thing. Okay? Physical bullies do not get into mental gymnastics with the smart kid. They threaten to punch them in the face if they don't give up their lunch money. Okay? The egghead, who thinks he's smarter than everybody else, doesn't play that more than once or twice with the muscle guy who knows he's not as smart, but will punch you to be right. Right? Emotional bullies, those are just way different. They use shit that shouldn't be a weapon, like love and friendship and stuff. And those are harder to see through, but okay, that's where the realm of Kokoro Hodoki lives, right? If you really loved me, you would fill in the blank, right? If you were really my friend, you would da-da-da. Really? Interesting. At what point did we agree on that? So anyway. Okay, so I need to keep on moving here. Let's see. So last week I alluded to putting together something special, right? And I mentioned this term because that's what it is, right? I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what I'm calling the warrior comeback system, right? So for the handful of you who have been writing me or messaging me or talking to me in the dojo or whatever, right? Telling me how long you've wanted to come back, but didn't know how, or how long you've been trying to work on this aspect or that aspect, right? Control your mind or get certain things under control, right? And you've been trying different things, but ultimately you have to admit that you don't know how, right? For those starting and then getting derailed, right? Feeling how you feel about it, right? Everybody has their own little responses, right? I'm opening something new, something I've never offered in this way before. As a matter of fact, I've resisted doing it. But I've come up with we'll call it a light model, right? Very laser focused, right? I'm calling it the warrior comeback system. It's really designed for people that have certain they just know that they're stuck, and it's not necessarily for just people who are coming back to the training, right? And trying to make that happen, right? But anybody who's stuck on something that's just causing major freaking frustration and that kind of crap, right? It's a private one-on-one coaching program, okay, for the returning warrior, right? This is not curriculum. This is not a technique library. This is not a group program, okay? This is laser coaching. It is customized to you, focused, strategic, real-time help to break the internal grabs, the internal knots holding you back, right? And helping you rebuild your training momentum in small, powerful steps. And we can I'll explain how you can talk to me about it if you want. But what it basically comes down to is, with the exception of the first one, which is 30 minutes, 15-minute private one-on-one coaching sessions where you will work on something very specific, right? It's designed to be a 1-year program. Of course, you're going to do you anyway, right? But starts with an assessment about where you think the problem is and all that kind of stuff, right? And after that, then it's 15-minute things, right? Unlimited one-on-one coaching with one hard, fast rule, no exceptions. Homework from any given session must be completed with proof before the next call can be scheduled. Okay. This one, like most people know that are in my inner circle programs and stuff like that, I gave you the training, I give you the techniques and all that kind of stuff. You do you. You're self-accountable. In this one, high accountability. Okay. No completion of the homework, no scheduling for the next call. Okay. And again, short 15-minute sessions, very short, quick next things. So there will be improvement. There has to be, because you have to complete the task to get the next one. Okay. So friendly warning though, right? I'll get to this one here in a bit, right? This is delivered slowly and intentionally. Right? Before I tell you how to contact me, I need to warn you something though. I'm warning you about something, right? The same invisible tie that's been stopping your training will try to stop you from taking this simple step, this contact me step. Okay. That hesitation you feel, that not right now voice, that maybe later, whatever, right? That is the grab. That is the thing we need to untie. So here's your first assignment, free of charge. When you feel that tug, I want you to recognize it and send me the damn message anyway. Because if not, you're not working on doing anything. Okay? It is a simple task. It's not difficult. Okay? Oh, and once we set the first initial discovery meeting, doesn't cost anything, right? You're going to feel that tug again. One tells you, cancel, now's not the best time. He probably already has the 8 or 9 people. That's the limit on this one or whatever. Whatever it is, okay? Yeah. Recognize it and keep the damn appointment anyway. Otherwise, you're not trying to untie anything. Okay? So, again, here's the thing. If you want to finally break the invisible tie that's holding you back, and again, the reason this has to be highly customizable is because, and why it can't be a group training, is because everybody's unique. We have to ferret out the bindings, right? You need an external awareness. Okay? If you want my personal help untying the grabs that have kept you stuck, just send me a message. Anywhere you follow me. I prefer email because it's easier for me. You can send it to warriorc@warrior-concepts-online.com, but just message me with the words "come back." COME space BACK. That's it. If you're a local student, you want to do it, then you just need to, well, you can still contact me that way, but we're not going to take up time in class or anything like that. Okay. This is not connected to any other program that anybody is in. This is highly personal. This is the unstuck kind of thing, right? These are not hour-long coaching sessions. This is one thing at a time. And the Buddha used this as an analogy too, right? Our life is like, imagine a ball of yarn, but it wasn't wound properly. It's just buildup of knots upon knots upon knots upon knots upon knots. Everybody's trying to do something to have the whole thing just fall apart. Wouldn't that be fucking nice? Except that's not how we built it. So it needs to be undone one knot at a time. Okay? One knot at a time. Right? That's it. Right? Send comeback. If you can send that message, you've already proven you're ready. You and I both know most people won't do it. Okay? But you and I both know, at least I hope we both know, you're not most people. I'm pretty sure that everybody that follows me prides themselves in not being average, normal, or anything like that, right? Okay? Right? We're doing ninjutsu. Everybody makes fun of fucking ninja these days, right? Okay? You're not most people. You're a warrior. Okay? Or you want to unleash that warrior you know is inside. And every warrior deserves a comeback story. Okay? So we'll talk privately. I'll tell you how it works. And we'll see if we're a good fit, right? See if you're a good fit for this small group of students that I'm taking. But again, I use the term group because it's a collective. It's how I'm kind of managing my time, right? But it's not a group program. And I'm not teaching physical techniques. This is built on last week's action. Confidence will improve. Motivation will improve. All kinds of things will improve because this is action-based. It's not theory. It's not do it yourself. There's an aspect that you're going to do. You're going to check in, and then you can schedule your next thing. Okay? If I'm on vacation, even if I'm ill, and we can't do like one-on-one kind of things, right? Then we'll do it by email. And those are few and far in between, or far and few in between, right? If there's something that you're stuck on to complete the task and you can't get it done, so you can't schedule the next call, but you're stuck, if I can't answer it by email, then I will shoot a short video lesson and get that to you. You can't not make progress using this framework because the framework is based on progress, not on learning shit. You also can't dance around things. Yeah, I'll get to that one. Can't I just get to the next one? No, because until this knot's untied, we can't get to the next one. Right? So I don't know how many have done this, but there's a pretty popular trend. It's been around for a couple of years. James, you can probably cite some of the people that do this. There are these alpha male programs. You know what I'm talking about? The leaders of these things are usually like chisel cut old guys, some with beards, some without, right? Buff, all that kind of stuff. Usually wear black. Very, very popular. Old guys sign up for this stuff all the time. Or they, you may have even done this, right? Not James, but you may have contacted other instructors and said, I'm stuck. And how do I do this? And what? And they, sell you a program, more techniques, right? You don't need fucking techniques. Right? You need an anti-path. Okay. No amount of techniques can fix what is preventing forward momentum. Right. The other thing about those alpha male programs that are very, very popular, that everybody signs up for, they have very high attrition rates. They have very high dropout rates because they expect you to do like caveman kind of stuff or still act like you're in your 20s, 30s, fit, whatever, right? And people are hurting themselves. they can't keep up, and then they end up feeling like fucking failures. Or like people buy a program and they got the best of intention, motivation, all that kind of stuff, and it's the same shit that's holding them back. And so they practice less and less, and then next thing you know, there's ghosting going on. I feel like shit. I must not be motivated. It's my age. It's this. It's that. And just like with the technique problem, the mistake is not where it's manifesting. It's somewhere else. But until we can see that, we can't fix it. We need somebody else to step in and go, here's the mistake you're making. I need you to watch for this thing. Okay. One simple little thing. Watch for this. Right. But they end up dropping out of those programs, or they end up buying another fucking program because they're hope beyond hope, looking for the thing that'll work, but they keep looking for techniques. They keep looking for things to do that remind them of that 20 something or whatever, because they're looking for external physical skills and not the internal ability to untie the knots that they don't even know are strapping them to the plank, so to speak, right? So your training path does not require perfect conditions. It requires honest steps, okay? The grab before the grab before the problem, all that is always internal, okay? So hopefully during this episode, you've got a chance to see, or you've learned how to see it, right? The next step is to break it. And if you need help, I'm here. If you want the help, message that says come back, and then we'll start the process to just discuss it. Okay? But again, those same anchors, the rope to the wooden peg, as soon as we feel it, okay, same click war response. So the first assignment is, when you feel it, recognize it for what the hell it is, and know that the only way to break free of it is to take the step that will drag the damn peg out of the ground. To not be the trapped, enslaved elephant that's more than powerful enough to walk away from what's holding it down. We have to ferret out what's conditioning us, the feelings and all that kind of stuff that's holding us. Because people often say that they're not motivated. I'm lacking motivation or whatever. People are highly fucking motivated. Everybody is motivated. Most people are just motivated to stay comfortable and not create that pain or agitation, because they fear that more than they fear anything else. Okay. Anyway, last round, James. Questions, comments, complaints from you. That'll work too, right? The surrogate for everybody else. James looks so serious. Look at him.
Maury said, amazing analogy, becoming aware of the chains that hold us down, rooted in the subconscious like the elephant. Some associations we pick up young and we are unaware we even have them.
Yeah. So that's why I have paid good money, or in other ways traded time, services, whatever, to get in front of and connect with and be under certain mentors, because they can see those things. They know what it takes to do that. And if I can't see it, what am I going to do? Guess how many hours would it take to go through all kinds of self-help videos on fucking YouTube to even get the gist? And then even if I got those, how many times have you done that, right? How do I get more motivation? How do I stick to something? How do I calm my mind or whatever, right? But then when it's time to actually do the task and the rope pulls and then you don't do it, It doesn't matter that you fucking watched 10 videos that told you how to do it. Because YouTube videos can't hold you accountable. They can't act like a mentor. They're just more information and education. They're not accountability, and they're not tailored and action oriented to get things done. Everything is still being left in your court. Great. Okay. But if we don't know what's holding us back inside of us, it's easy to see what holds us back outside. But if we won't tell them to get the hell out of the way, it's even easier to ignore our own little pulls and whatever. Right? What else, James?
Well, looks like most of it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have for this one. Right. I'm hoping that, those who are serious will, when I say those, I should say, I hope that you will. I'll just make it personal. Right. As though I'm just talking to one person. I hope you will. Because if I depersonalize it and say, I hope that those who are serious, right, ego just pressure's off me. Nope. Talking to you. As a matter of fact, I use this in class a lot, and I got it from Shidoshi Malmstrom. James is already smiling. He already knows what I'm going to say. If you're ever wondering if I'm talking to you, go ahead, James, finish it.
I'm not talking to the person next to you.
I'm not talking to the person next to you. Fantastic. All right. That's what I got. James, anything else?
No, sir.
All right, guys. That's it. I will talk to everybody again, hopefully very, very soon. If not, I'll talk to you next time on KUDEN. Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.